How does a quiet father become the most dangerous man in the room, without ever raising his voice? When my future son-in-law told me I was banned from their wedding, I smiled. But when my daughter stood up for me, the whole table exploded, and what happened next would turn the entire family upside down. The tension in Romano's upscale Italian restaurant was thick enough to cut with a knife. I sat at the long mahogany table, watching my daughter Alyssa fidget with her engagement ring while her fiancé, Brady Connelly, held court with his parents. This was supposed to be our blended families pre-wedding dinner, a chance for everyone to get acquainted before the big day. I'm Eugene Turner, 56 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life working quietly in real estate and trusts law. Not glamorous work, but it pays well and keeps me sharp. My daughter Alyssa is my whole world, has been since her mother Patricia and I divorced 8 years ago. At 27, she's brilliant, independent, and about to marry into what she thought was the perfect family. Brady Connelly, 29, runs operations for a tech startup that his father Lawrence helped fund. The Connollys live in a different world than we do: country club memberships, vacation homes, the kind of wealth that comes with expectations and attitudes. From the moment I met them 6 months ago, I could feel their judgment. Eugene, Denise Connelly said, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she adjusted her pearl necklace. Remind me again what exactly you do for work. I'd answered this question 3 times already tonight. Real estate law and estate planning, I replied calmly, cutting my chicken piccata. How practical, Lawrence added, not bothering to look up from his wine glass. Brady's been telling us about some of the properties he and Alyssa have been looking at. Quite ambitious for young people. The subtext was clear: too ambitious for people like us. Alyssa's jaw tightened. Dad's been incredibly generous helping us with the down payments and legal work, she said firmly. Brady placed a patronizing hand on her shoulder. Sweetheart, we've talked about this. My family has connections that can help us much more effectively. I kept eating, saying nothing. I'd learned long ago that wealthy people often mistake quiet for weakness. It's a mistake that usually costs them. The important thing, Denise continued, is that the wedding reflects the proper standards. We've invited some very important people, and first impressions matter so much. Speaking of the wedding, Brady said, his voice taking on a casual tone that immediately put me on alert, we need to discuss the final guest arrangements. He turned in his chair and tapped my shoulder. Not a friendly gesture, but something dismissive, like summoning a waiter. Eugene, he said quietly, leaning close enough that only I could hear initially. My parents and I have been talking, and we've decided it would be better if you didn't attend the ceremony. Nothing personal, but the optics just don't work. Don't worry, though. We'll make sure you can stream it online. The words hit like ice water, but I kept my expression neutral. I set down my fork carefully and turned to look at him. Brady's face showed that smug confidence that comes from never being truly challenged. I'm sorry, what did you say? I asked, my voice level. Brady raised his voice slightly, apparently deciding the whole table should hear. I said you can watch the wedding online. It's actually quite convenient. You won't have to worry about travel or finding something appropriate to wear. The table fell silent. Alyssa's face went white, then red. Brady, she said slowly, please tell me you did not just uninvite my father to our wedding. Alyssa, be reasonable, Denise interjected. This is about what's best for everyone. Your father will still be part of the day, just differently. I sat quietly, watching my daughter's face transform. Alyssa had inherited my calm demeanor, but she'd also inherited her mother's fire when pushed too far. Are you out of your minds? Alyssa's voice started low but quickly rose. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Did you seriously just tell my father, the man who raised me, who paid for my education, who's been nothing but supportive of this relationship, that he's not good enough to attend his only daughter's wedding. Alyssa, please sit down, Brady hissed, looking around nervously as other diners started to stare. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene? Alyssa's voice carried across the restaurant now. You just humiliated my father in public and I'm the problem? Lawrence cleared his throat. Young lady, I think you need to consider what's really important here. Brady's career, the family connections, the opportunities. Then find yourself a new wife and a new job, Alyssa said, her voice shaking with fury as she stared directly at Brady. Because if you can't respect my father, you sure as hell don't deserve me. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Brady's face cycled through shock, embarrassment, and then anger. Have you lost your mind? He snapped, standing to face her. Come to your senses, Alyssa. You're throwing away everything we've built for what? Your father's feelings? I finally spoke, my voice calm and clear. I heard everything perfectly well, Brady. Every word. Brady spun toward me, his composure completely gone. You're all crazy, he snarled. Then, in a move that shocked everyone at the table, he leaned over and spat directly onto my plate. Absolutely insane. He stormed out of the restaurant, leaving his parents scrambling to follow. Denise shot us a look of pure venom before hurrying after her son. I calmly picked up my napkin and wiped the edge of my plate, my mind already working. In my line of work, I'd learned that people reveal their true character when they think they hold all the cards. Brady had just shown me exactly who he really was. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your daughter will regret this. Both of you will. I quietly saved the message and looked at Alyssa, who was still standing, tears of anger in her eyes. Dad, I'm so sorry, she whispered. Don't be, I said softly, standing and placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You just showed me everything I need to know about the man you were about to marry, and more importantly, you showed me the woman I raised. As we left the restaurant, I was already planning our next moves. Brady Connelly had made a critical error. He'd threatened my daughter. And in my world, that was a line you never, ever cross. Back in my home office that night, I sat surrounded by the familiar comfort of law books and filing cabinets, trying to process what had just happened. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of my computer and the distant sound of Alyssa making tea in the kitchen. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and began writing down everything I could remember about Brady's behavior over the past 6 months. The signs had been there all along. I'd just hoped I was wrong. Alyssa and Brady had met at a tech conference in Austin, where she was representing her marketing firm. She'd come home glowing, talking about this brilliant, ambitious man who'd swept her off her feet. I'd been happy for her, after her difficult breakup 2 years earlier. She deserved someone who appreciated her intelligence and drive. The first red flag had come at their engagement party 4 months ago. Brady had introduced me to his friends as Alyssa's dad. He does some kind of legal stuff. When I'd tried to join their conversation about property investment, Brady had smoothly redirected the discussion, making it clear my input wasn't valued. Then there were the subtle comments. When Alyssa mentioned that I was helping them review their prenup, Brady had laughed and said, "That's sweet, but my family's attorneys have already handled everything important." When she'd suggested I walk her down the aisle, Denise had pursed her lips and muttered something about traditional family structures. The worst part was watching my confident, successful daughter gradually begin to second-guess herself. She'd started asking my opinion less, apologizing for Brady's behavior more, and making excuses for why I couldn't attend certain events. Dad? Alyssa appeared in the doorway, holding 2 steaming mugs. She looked exhausted, her makeup smeared from crying. "Come in, sweetheart," I said, clearing space on my desk. She settled into the leather chair across from me, the same chair where she'd done homework as a teenager, and where we'd had countless heart-to-heart talks over the years. "I keep thinking about all the things I ignored," she said quietly. The way he'd changed the subject, when you tried to contribute to conversations. How his parents would ask about your work like it was some kind of hobby. The way he'd make decisions about our life without consulting me, then present them as if they were foregone conclusions. I sipped my tea, letting her talk. Sometimes the best thing a father can do is listen. Remember when you taught me about contracts in high school? She continued. You said the most important thing wasn't what people promised, but what they did when they thought no one was watching. I remember. Well, tonight I saw what Brady does when he thinks he has all the power, and it made me sick. I reached across the desk and took her hand. I'm proud of you for standing up to him. That took real courage. I'm scared, Dad. We've bought property together, opened joint accounts, made so many financial commitments. I don't even know where to start untangling everything. That's when I smiled, really smiled, for the first time all evening. Sweetheart, untangling complex financial arrangements is literally what I do for a living, and I happen to know exactly what assets you and Brady hold together. I pulled out a thick folder I'd been maintaining since their engagement. Inside were copies of every document Alyssa had asked me to review: property deeds, joint account agreements, investment portfolios, even the prenup Brady's family had insisted on. The condo you bought together? I said, flipping through the papers. You put down the entire down payment from your trust fund. Brady's name is on the deed, but the money trail is clear. The investment account? Funded entirely by your inheritance from your grandmother. The vacation rental property in Colorado. Again, your money, your credit, your qualification for the loan. Alyssa's eyes widened as she looked at the documents. I never really thought about it that way. Brady always talked about our assets. Legally speaking, most of these assets are yours. Brady benefited from your financial contributions and your excellent credit, but the paper trail shows exactly where the money came from. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Tell your daughter she's making a big mistake. The Connelly family doesn't forget disrespect. I showed Alyssa the message, watching her face harden. He's threatening us now? Apparently so. I saved the message and added it to a new folder I'd created on my computer, labeled Brady Connelly, Evidence. What do we do? I looked at my daughter, brilliant, strong, and finally free of the man who'd been slowly undermining her confidence for months. We document everything. We protect your assets, and we make sure Brady Connelly learns that threatening my daughter was the biggest mistake of his life. That night, after Alyssa went home to her condo, I stayed up late organizing files and making notes. I'd spent my career helping people protect their assets from those who would take advantage of them. I'd just never imagined I'd need to protect my own daughter from her fiancé. But as I worked, I felt a familiar calm settling over me. This was what I was good at, seeing through the complexity to find the simple truth underneath. And the truth was that Brady Connelly had picked the wrong family to mess with. The next morning, Alyssa called me from Brady's office building, her voice shaking. Dad, I went to get my things from Brady's apartment and he wasn't there, so I thought I'd try his office. But when I got here, she paused, and I could hear traffic in the background. He saw me in the lobby and started yelling, in front of everyone. He said I'd humiliated him, and that I had no idea what I'd gotten myself into. Where are you now? In my car in the parking garage. Dad, he said he was going to ruin both of us. He said his family has connections and that we'd regret crossing them. I was already reaching for my keys. Stay in your car. I'm coming to get you. 20 minutes later, I found Alyssa sitting in her Honda Civic, looking smaller than I'd seen her since she was a child. I parked next to her and got into her passenger seat. Tell me exactly what he said. He said... She took a shaky breath. He said that girls who cross the Connelly family don't fare well in this city. That his father has business relationships with half the companies I might want to work with. That he'd make sure everyone knew I was unstable and vindictive. As she spoke, my phone started ringing. Denise Connelly's name appeared on the screen. Mrs. Connelly, I answered calmly. Eugene, we need to talk. This situation has gotten completely out of hand. I agree. Good. Then you'll help us convince Alyssa to apologize and move forward with the wedding. Brady is willing to forgive her outburst if she acknowledges that she overreacted. I almost laughed. I don't think you understand the situation, Denise. I understand perfectly. Your daughter embarrassed my son in public, and now she needs to make it right. The invitations are sent, the venue is booked, and frankly, Alyssa will never find another man from a family like ours. You're right about one thing, I said. She'll never find another man like Brady. Thank God. The line went quiet for a moment. When Denise spoke again, her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. You're making a very serious mistake, Eugene. My family has worked very hard to build our position in this community. We don't let people damage our reputation without consequences. Is that a threat? It's a reality. I suggest you think very carefully about what's best for your daughter's future. She hung up. I looked at Alyssa, who had heard every word. They're not going to let this go, are they? She asked. No, they're not. Which means we need to be prepared. That afternoon, we drove to the Connelly mansion for what was supposed to be a small engagement party, an event that had been planned weeks ago and that Denise apparently had no intention of canceling despite the previous night's events. The house was exactly what I'd expected, a massive colonial with perfectly manicured grounds and a circular driveway full of expensive cars. We'd only come to collect some of Alyssa's belongings that were stored there, but Denise met us at the door with a smile that could have frozen water. Alyssa, darling, I'm so glad you came to your senses. I'm just here for my things, Mrs. Connelly. Nonsense. The party is already underway. Everyone's asking about you. Before we could object, we found ourselves swept into the backyard, where about 30 people were mingling around a pool and outdoor bar. I immediately felt the stares and whispered conversations. Brady appeared at my elbow, his smile sharp and predatory. Eugene, I wasn't sure you'd show up, though I guess it makes sense. Probably not many chances for you to see how the other half lives. A woman nearby, one of Denise's friends, laughed. Oh, are you the father? How exciting. I heard you'll be watching online. That's so modern, isn't it? Like having your own personal streaming service. More laughter. I felt Alyssa tense beside me, but I kept my expression neutral. Actually, Brady continued, his voice carrying to the nearby group, we were just discussing how the wedding is really about bringing together families of similar backgrounds. It's important for the children, you know. Of course, another guest chimed in. Breeding tells, as they say. I watched Brady's face as he soaked up the support from his parents' friends. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. This was about power, about putting us in our place. That's when I noticed Patricia, my ex-wife, standing near the pool bar. She caught my eye and walked over. Jean, she said quietly, can I talk to you for a minute? We stepped away from the group. Patricia and I had maintained a cordial relationship since our divorce, united in our love for Alyssa, if nothing else. I heard about last night, she said. Alyssa called me this morning. And I think you're both doing the right thing. I never liked Brady, but I kept my mouth shut because Alyssa seemed happy. But after what he did to you? She shook her head. That boy has no idea who he's dealing with. Patricia knew me better than almost anyone. She'd been married to me during the early years of my career, when I was building my reputation as someone who could untangle the most complex financial disputes. She'd seen me take on opponents who thought they could intimidate or outmaneuver me, only to discover that the quiet man across the table held all the winning cards. Just promise me you'll be careful, she said. The Connellys have money and connections, but you have something more dangerous. What's that? You have patience, and you never let anyone see you coming until it's too late. That evening, back in my home office, I spread out all the documents related to Alyssa and Brady's shared assets. Property deeds, bank statements, investment accounts, loan documents, everything they'd built together over the past year. What I found was even better than I'd hoped. The downtown condo they'd purchased. Alyssa had provided the entire $80,000 down payment from her trust fund. Brady's name was on the deed as a joint owner, but the money trail clearly showed the funds coming from Alyssa's account. The investment portfolio they'd opened, funded entirely by Alyssa's inheritance from her grandmother, $150,000 that Brady had helped her invest wisely. The vacation rental property in Aspen? Again, Alyssa's credit, Alyssa's down payment, Alyssa's qualification for the loan. Brady had contributed exactly nothing except his signature on the papers. In total, Alyssa had invested nearly $400,000 in assets that Brady now considered theirs. I opened a new file on my computer and began typing. If Brady wanted to play games, I'd show him what real power looked like. My phone buzzed with a text from yet another unknown number. Your daughter should watch her back. Accidents happen to people who don't know their place. I screenshot the message, saved it, and added it to my growing evidence file. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Nolan Green's office. Nolan, it's Eugene Turner. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. How immediate? The kind where someone just threatened my daughter. There was a pause. Nolan had been my mentor when I was starting out in real estate law, and he'd become one of my closest friends over the years. He knew exactly what that meant. I'll clear my schedule. Bring everything. As I hung up, I felt that familiar calm settling over me again. Brady Connelly thought he was dealing with some small-town lawyer who could be intimidated by threats and social pressure. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Nolan Green's law office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the city. I'd arrived early, carrying 2 briefcases full of documents and a USB drive containing every digital communication I'd saved over the past 48 hours. Nolan was 60 years old, silver-haired, and had the kind of reputation that made opposing counsel nervous. He'd taught me that the best legal strategies were like icebergs. Most of the work happened below the surface, invisible until the moment of impact. Eugene, he said, gesturing to the conference table where I'd spread out my files. Walk me through this. I handed him the folder containing Brady's threats, the property documents, and a timeline I'd prepared showing the pattern of escalating harassment. The short version is that my daughter's fiancé and his family decided I wasn't good enough to attend their wedding. When Alyssa stood up for me, they began making threats. Nolan reviewed the text messages, his expression growing darker with each screenshot. These are explicit threats of financial retaliation and physical harm, he said. Have you filed a police report? That's my next stop, but I wanted to understand our legal position on the property issues first. Nolan spent the next hour reviewing every document, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. Finally, he leaned back in his chair with a slight smile. Eugene, this is almost too easy. Under state law, assets acquired through individual inheritance or trust funds remain separate property unless explicitly commingled or gifted. The paper trail you've documented shows that virtually every major asset in this relationship was funded by Alyssa's separate property. What does that mean practically? It means that if Brady tries to claim half of these assets in any kind of legal proceeding, we can demonstrate that he contributed essentially nothing to their acquisition. The condo, the investment accounts, the rental property, all of it traces back to Alyssa's individual funds. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and began sketching out a strategy. Here's what we're going to do. First, we'll file immediate paperwork to protect Alyssa's interests in all shared assets. Second, we'll prepare a comprehensive documentation package showing Brady's threats and harassment. Third, we'll quietly begin the process of transferring full ownership of these assets back to Alyssa's name only. Can we do that without Brady's consent? Given the circumstances and the documentation of threats, yes. We'll need to move quickly, but the law is clearly on our side. 2 hours later, I walked into the downtown police station with Detective Tara Martinez, a 41-year-old investigator who specialized in harassment and threat cases. I'd called ahead, and she'd agreed to see me immediately. "Mr. Turner," she said, leading me to a small interview room, "tell me about these threats." I handed her printouts of every text message, email, and voicemail Brady and his family had sent. I also provided a written statement detailing the restaurant incident and the confrontation at Brady's office. Detective Martinez reviewed everything carefully, occasionally asking questions about timing and witnesses. "This is definitely harassment," she said finally. "The threats of financial retaliation could potentially rise to the level of extortion, depending on what actions they take. I'm going to open an official investigation." "What does that mean?" "It means we'll be monitoring the situation closely. Any further threats should be reported immediately, and if they follow through on any of these threats, we'll have grounds for arrest." She handed me a case number and her direct phone line. "Mr. Turner, I've seen cases like this before. Wealthy families who think they can intimidate people into submission. They usually back down once they realize law enforcement is involved." From the police station, I drove to Pinnacle Real Estate, the agency that had handled Alyssa and Brady's property purchases. The agent, Catherine Walsh, had worked with my firm on several transactions over the years. "Eugene," she said, looking nervous as I walked into her office, "I was hoping you'd call. We've had some unusual requests regarding the Turner Connelly properties." "What kind of requests?" "Brady Connelly came in yesterday asking about transferring the condo deed to his name only. He said Alyssa had agreed to sign over her interest, but he didn't have any paperwork to support that claim." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Catherine, I need you to know that Alyssa has not agreed to any such transfer. In fact, she's currently the victim of harassment and threats from Mr. Connelly. Any attempts to change ownership of these properties without proper legal documentation should be reported to me immediately. Of course, I'll flag all the accounts right away. There's something else. I need you to prepare a complete financial history of all properties purchased by Alyssa Turner and Brady Connelly. Source of funds, down payments, monthly payments, everything. I can have that ready by tomorrow morning." That afternoon, I met Alyssa at a quiet coffee shop downtown. She looked tired but determined, and I could see some of her natural confidence returning. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "Better. I went to the bank this morning and froze our joint accounts. The manager said Brady had already tried to access them yesterday, but since both signatures are required for large withdrawals, he couldn't touch anything." "Good thinking." "Dad, I keep thinking about what Brady said, that his family has connections, that they could hurt my career. What if they really can blacklist me somehow?" I pulled out my laptop and opened a document I'd been working on. "Sweetheart, I want to show you something. This is a list of every client I've worked with over the past 20 years. Law firms, real estate companies, investment groups, tech startups." Alyssa's eyes widened as she scrolled through the list. "I didn't realize you knew so many people in the industry. The thing about working in trusts and estates is that you end up helping a lot of successful people protect their assets, and when you do good work for them, they remember." I showed her another document, a list of character references I'd already begun preparing. If Brady wants to play the connections game, he's going to discover that the quiet lawyer he dismissed actually knows quite a few important people himself. My phone buzzed with another threatening text, this time from Brady's number. "Your daughter is going to lose everything. My family will make sure she never works in this city again." I showed it to Alyssa, then saved it to my evidence file. 27 threats in 3 days, I said calmly. "Detective Martinez is going to be very interested in this pattern." "What happens next?" I closed my laptop and looked at my daughter, my brilliant, strong daughter who had finally seen through Brady's manipulation. "Next, we let Brady and his family think they're winning while we quietly put all the pieces in place. And then, when they least expect it, we show them exactly what happens when you threaten a Turner." That evening, I received a formal invitation in my email. You are cordially invited to the rehearsal dinner for Brady Connelly and Alyssa Turner. Friday evening, 6:30 p.m., Romano's private dining room. I stared at the invitation for a long moment, then opened my evidence file and began organizing everything into a single folder. It was time for Brady Connelly to learn that the quiet man he'd dismissed was actually the most dangerous person in the room. The courthouse lobby was bustling with morning activity as Alyssa and I met with Nolan Green to finalize the legal protections we'd been preparing. In my briefcase was a folder containing documents that would fundamentally shift the balance of power in this entire situation. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" Alyssa asked as we walked toward the elevator. "Once we file these papers, there's no going back." "Sweetheart, Brady made his choice when he decided to threaten you. Now we're simply protecting your interests, legally." Nolan was waiting for us in conference room B, surrounded by neatly organized stacks of papers. Over the past 3 days, he'd worked with remarkable efficiency to prepare everything we needed. "Alyssa," he said, standing as we entered, "I need you to understand exactly what we're doing here before you sign anything." He spread 3 documents across the table. "First, this is a formal request to partition the jointly held properties based on individual contributions. Since you provided 100% of the funding for these assets, you're entitled to 100% ownership." What does that mean for Brady? It means he'll need to either buy out your interest at fair market value or relinquish his claim entirely. Given that he contributed no funds to the purchases, he has no legal basis to claim ownership. Nolan moved to the second document. This is a restraining order application based on the documented threats and harassment. If approved, Brady will be legally prohibited from contacting you or interfering with your property. And the third? A formal complaint to the State Bar Association regarding Brady's attorney, his father's lawyer who helped draft the original property agreements. Those agreements failed to properly document the source of funds, which could constitute malpractice given the amounts involved. I watched Alyssa's face as she processed the implications. This wasn't just about protecting her assets. This was about sending a clear message that the Connelly family's behavior had serious legal consequences. "If I sign these, what happens to Brady?" "He'll discover that trying to intimidate people has costs," Nolan said simply. "Real costs." Alyssa picked up the pen and signed all 3 documents without hesitation. An hour later, we were sitting in Detective Martinez's office, reviewing the updated evidence file I'd prepared. 34 separate threatening communications in 5 days, she said, flipping through the printouts. This has escalated well beyond simple harassment. "What's our next step?" "I'm issuing a formal notice requiring Mr. Connelly to come in for questioning regarding these threats. If he refuses, or if the threats continue, we'll move forward with criminal charges." She handed me an official document. "This is a notice of police investigation. I recommend you carry copies with you to the rehearsal dinner tonight." "You think that's wise? Going to the dinner?" Detective Martinez smiled grimly. "Mr. Turner, in my experience, bullies like Brady Connelly need to be confronted publicly. They count on their victims being too intimidated to fight back. When someone stands up to them with real evidence and legal backing, they usually fold pretty quickly." That afternoon, Alyssa and I met at her condo to review our strategy for the evening. The rehearsal dinner had taken on a significance neither of us had anticipated. It would be the first time all the players would be in the same room since everything had started. "I'm nervous," she admitted, pacing around her living room. "What if Brady tries to make a scene? What if his parents have some kind of plan?" "Then we'll be ready," I said, patting the briefcase beside me. "Remember, we're not going there to argue or defend ourselves. We're going there to deliver information." "What kind of information?" I opened the briefcase and showed her the folder I'd prepared. It contained copies of every legal document we'd filed, every piece of evidence we'd collected, and a summary of the police investigation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth, clearly and completely, in front of witnesses. My phone rang. It was Catherine Walsh from the real estate agency. "Eugene, I thought you should know. Brady Connelly just left my office. He was demanding that I process a property transfer, giving him full ownership of the condo. When I told him I couldn't do that without proper legal documentation, he became very aggressive." "Aggressive how?" "He said his family would make sure my agency lost all our high-end clients. He said I was making a serious mistake by refusing to cooperate." "Did you record any of this?" "I have security cameras in my office. Everything is on video." I smiled. Brady was doing exactly what I'd hoped he would do, escalating his threats and creating more evidence of his harassment. "Catherine, I need you to preserve that video and prepare a written statement about what happened. Detective Martinez will want to see it." After I hung up, Alyssa looked at me with something approaching awe. "Dad, how did you know he would do that?" "Because men like Brady always double down when they feel cornered. He can't conceive of a world where he doesn't get what he wants, so he keeps pushing harder and harder until he destroys himself." That evening, as I put on my best suit and checked my briefcase one final time, I felt the same calm focus I'd experienced before every major legal confrontation of my career. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. It was about showing my daughter that standing up to bullies has consequences, and that sometimes the quiet people are the ones you should fear most. I picked up the folder labeled "For Rehearsal Dinner" and headed for the door. Brady Connelly had wanted to play power games with my family. Tonight, he was going to learn how those games ended when you picked the wrong opponent. Romano's private dining room was exactly as I remembered it. Elegant, intimate, and tonight, charged with an electricity that made every conversation feel forced. The entire wedding party was there. Brady's groomsmen, Alyssa's bridesmaids, both sets of parents, and various family members who had flown in for the weekend. I entered quietly, carrying my briefcase, and took a seat near the back of the room. Alyssa was already there, sitting stiffly beside Brady, who was holding court with his usual confidence. The Connellys were at the head table, Denise wearing a smile that could have cut glass. "Eugene!" Lawrence called out with false joviality. "So glad you could make it. Though I'm surprised to see you here, given the arrangements we discussed." Conversations around the room quieted as people turned to watch. I could see phones being pulled out, cameras discreetly positioned. In the age of social media, everything was recorded. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied calmly, setting my briefcase on the table beside me. Brady leaned back in his chair, his confidence radiating across the room. "Well, this should be interesting. I hope you're not here to cause any more scenes like the other night." "Actually," I said, standing slowly, "I'm here to clear up some misunderstandings." Denise rose as well, raising her champagne glass. "Before we get into anything unpleasant, I'd like to make a toast about family unity, about how important it is for families to understand their place and work together harmoniously." She looked directly at me as she spoke, her meaning clear to everyone in the room. "I think it's wonderful when people know their role and don't try to reach beyond their station. Some families have worked for generations to build their reputation and standing, and it's so important that they're not diminished by inappropriate associations." Murmurs of agreement from the Connelly side of the room. I could see Alyssa's hands clenched in her lap, her face flushed with anger. "Family unity is indeed important," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room, "which is why I wanted to share some information with everyone here tonight." I opened my briefcase and pulled out the folder I'd prepared. Over the past week, my daughter has been the target of an escalating campaign of threats and harassment. I thought it would be appropriate to document that campaign for everyone to see. The room went completely silent. Brady's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said quickly. "I'm talking about 34 separate threatening communications sent to my daughter over the past 5 days. I pulled out the first set of printouts. threats of financial retaliation, career sabotage, and physical harm. I began reading directly from the messages. Your daughter should watch her back. Accidents happen to people who don't know their place. Girls who cross the Connelly family don't fare well in this city. She'll never work again once we're done with her. The room was completely silent now. Several people were openly recording with their phones. Dad, stop, Brady said, his voice tight. You're taking things out of context. Am I? I pulled out another document. This is a police report filed with Detective Tara Martinez of the Metro Police Department. Case number 2024-4471, official investigation into harassment and threats. Denise's face had gone white. This is ridiculous. Brady would never. This, I continued, pulling out another paper, is a formal notice requiring Brady to appear for police questioning regarding these threats. It was issued this afternoon. I could see panic spreading across the Connelly side of the room. Lawrence was whispering urgently to his wife, while Brady's groomsmen were staring at him with obvious shock. But here's what I find most interesting, I said, pulling out the property documents. During this campaign of harassment, Brady also attempted to fraudulently transfer ownership of assets that belong entirely to my daughter. I held up the real estate documents Catherine Walsh had prepared. The downtown condo that Brady considers theirs, purchased entirely with funds from Alyssa's trust. The investment portfolio, funded entirely by Alyssa's inheritance. The vacation property in Aspen. Again, 100% of the down payment and monthly payments came from Alyssa's accounts. Brady shot to his feet. That's not how it works. We're engaged. Those are shared assets. Actually, I said calmly, under state law, assets purchased with separate inherited funds remain separate property unless explicitly gifted or commingled. The paper trail is very clear. I pulled out the final set of documents. Which is why, as of this afternoon, ownership of all these properties has been legally transferred back to Alyssa's name only. Brady's attempts to claim ownership of assets he never paid for have been rejected by both the courts and the real estate agencies involved. The room erupted. Brady was shouting, Denise was demanding to know how this was possible, and Lawrence was frantically making phone calls. This is insane, Brady yelled. You can't just steal our property. I didn't steal anything, I replied quietly. I simply documented who actually paid for everything. That's when Detective Martinez walked into the room, her badge clearly visible, carrying an official folder. Mr. Brady Connelly? Brady spun around, his face flushed with rage and panic. What is this? I'm Detective Martinez, Metro Police. I have a formal notice requiring you to appear for questioning regarding harassment and threatening communications. You're not under arrest, but I strongly recommend you contact an attorney before our meeting. She handed him the official notice as the entire room watched in stunned silence. Additionally, she continued, I have a restraining order that prohibits you from contacting Ms. Alyssa Turner or interfering with her property in any way. Brady stared at the papers in his hand, his world collapsing around him. This is impossible. My family has connections. We have lawyers. You have documented evidence of criminal harassment, Detective Martinez said calmly. And if you continue making threats, you'll have criminal charges as well. I stood up, closing my briefcase with a soft click. The room was so quiet you could hear the traffic outside. Respect is earned, not demanded, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. My daughter will never be bullied by anyone, not even her fiancé. Brady's face contorted with rage. You think you've won? You have no idea what my family is capable of. We'll destroy both of you. Mr. Connelly, Detective Martinez interrupted sharply. You're making threats in front of a police officer and 30 witnesses. I strongly suggest you stop talking. But Brady was beyond reason now, his careful facade completely shattered. This is all insane. Alyssa, tell them. Tell them you don't want this. Alyssa stood slowly, her hand finding mine. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "Brady, I want you out of my life. Forever." The final piece of Brady's composure cracked. He lunged toward us, shouting incoherently, but Detective Martinez stepped smoothly into his path. "Mr. Connelly, you're coming with me. Now." As Brady was escorted from the room, still protesting and making threats, the silence that followed was deafening. The Connelly family sat in shock, their social standing crumbling around them as phones